further. There was a government grant from Homes England to put the bridge across the road to the site, and at the time, some of you will remember that residents were very clear about the risks because of coal mines, about badger sets and a number of other environmental issues. And I think, if I'm honest, that not many of those concerns were heard within the council. Officers who are no longer within this council, Julie Whittaker in particular, and others, said actually no, we were actually wrong as residents and local councillors to raise these because these concerns were untrue. But quite clearly, since that road to nowhere has been built, things have not progressed over the last couple of years, and clearly part of it is around the coal board report and mine shafts that still mainly haven't been located. When this report came forward and it says actually there's going to be a reduced number of houses, understandably, that's fine, but there are still concerns that the council still hasn't defined exactly where the coal mines are or where the shafts are, and so this number could come down even further. And looking at your report, in sort of 25, 30 years of going to council meetings, it's the first time I've seen a Pendle council report, maybe others around the table or no otherwise, where recommendations have been made to achieve a capital receipt to facilitate development of the land in question, that the director is given delegated authority to agree a delayed capital receipt for the site. It's just an open-ended delay. And I think residents and taxpayers need to know how long this delay is going to be. Is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? Is it 12 months? Is it 2 years? Is there going to be development on this site? When does the planning permission expire? And if we were talking about value for money, a lot of dud information was given to members of the public, councillors at the time. I understand that councillors can only make decisions based on the information that's given to them. There is going to be development on this site, and the sooner the better now, because it's it's attracting people going onto it. There's when the contractors have been on site, they've been working weekends, they've been breaking planning conditions, and residents have been sending videos to Neil Watson of the work being carried out. But it feels to residents at times that if you're from Pearl Together or from one of the Pearl enterprises that Pendle Council has a joint venture with, you're allowed to go ahead and do anything that you want, and that's unacceptable. In terms of implications, as part of that deal that was done on the planning application, there was some section 106 monies, I think, around traffic calming schemes, upgrade of the zebra crossing to a pelican crossing on Barkerhouse Road, and the creation of a new zebra crossing the further up on Barkerhouse Road, opposite the care home near the school entrance on Tweed Street. If you are going to make this decision to delay, it'd be good to know how long that delay is going to be, or maximum time for the delay, or a review of that. To actually release the monies from Pearl or from Pendle Council, however it's structured, so at least the improvements can be made, because the zebra crossing at the bottom of Barkerhouse Road on the junction with Smith Street, the County Council upgrading that to a puffin and spending £224,000 this financial year. And if that work all was done together on Barkerhouse Road, that would make a massive difference. There's been a number of accidents where people have had serious accidents, and a young girl broke a leg recently after a car accident, and that would make real improvements, and it would reassure residents and also parents that the improvements are going to come. But if you leave this open-ended, Chairman, all that's going to happen is we don't know when that money is going to be released to the Highways Authority to make those highways improvements. So I just want some reassurances that the lessons learned from the misinformation will be learned, and maybe a report comes back to the executive of what went wrong, as things do go wrong, but lessons should be learned. Whether you are prepared to release that money for the highways improvements, highway safety improvements, and thirdly, what is the maximum delay that's going to take place before work starts on building homes, and finally, when are the final coal board reports going to come forward in the public domain to know exactly where all of them are. Is that okay?
Thank you, yeah, that's good.
Chairman?
if I can respond, and County Councillor Ali referred to misinformation, and I think he managed to weave quite a lot of misinformation into his talk then. And I will attempt to unpick some of it, but it is the case that the planning permission that this site got was for considerably more houses than is currently being put forward with a fresh planning application, and that's because of the problems that Councillor Ali outlined. And there was a meeting of the relevant Pearl Together entity under the previous Conservative administration, where all that was discussed, and councillors from all parties were aware of what the issues were. There is a mine shaft that has yet to be identified, and there's provision within the 129 home scheme to accommodate that, obviously not build on top of a mine shaft. It hasn't yet been found, but it will be, and the appropriate action taken. And I think it's fair comment that you know, clearly the scheme that was originally envisaged hasn't been possible to be carried out, and the outgoing administration considered that and came to a view about the way forward, and we are picking up the pieces, as it were, from that point of view. In terms of Azar's knocking Pearl, and the last time he came into this room knocking Pearl, I quoted chapter and verse about how many hundreds of houses have been renovated down in Whitefield by the joint venture Pearl. And I would remind Azar that he was one of the people advocating knocking all those houses down 20 odd years ago, and that was stopped, and we managed to renovate those, and they are something that Pendle should be very proud of. The various Pearl entities have gone on to build houses on brownfield sites when nobody else in Pendle was building, because it didn't stack up commercially, and have created hundreds, thousands of square metres of industrial space, which are providing jobs for local people. And tomorrow, the jewel in the crown of the Pearl joint venture entities is up for an award from the Municipal Journal, and it's been shortlisted as one of only a handful of schemes across the country about outstanding partnership working. And Briarfield Mill, or as it's known now, Northlight, is an outstanding achievement which would never have happened without that joint venture. So I will defend the joint venture to anybody. I think without that joint venture we would have had a decade and a half of stagnation. We would not have had all that regeneration, we would not have had the jobs, we would not have had the homes that... Oh, where does Councillor Ali live?
Pearl.
You live in a Pearl property. So Councillor Ali himself lives in one of the...
Conflict of interest.
Pardon?
He's got an interest.
He's got a conflict of interest. I don't think he has. But, I mean, the point that I'm making is that there have been a resounding success for Pendle, for regenerating Pendle, and I do regret that people tend to knock the activities of that joint venture, because when the government funding dried up and the housing grants dried up back 13, 14, 15 years ago, that was the only way that we could enable the continuation of that regeneration work. And as I say, it has been an outstanding success. The delay in terms of getting a capital receipt is not anything that is going to affect construction on site. There's a planning permission to be determined, and the construction on site is in train pending that successful planning application. When you're building something, you've got to have the finance to do the construction work, and the Pearl Together joint venture is set up on the basis of the council has got a 15% stake, Barnfield Construction have a 15% stake, Together Housing through their development arm, Harewood, whatever it is, has a 70% stake. So that means if you've got to invest £10 million, or whatever the figure is, this council at the outset needs to stump up £1.5 million in order for its share of the investment. When you get to the end of the development, whatever the development may be, there's a rate of return, and ultimately when the joint ventures are wound up, the capital receipt will flow to the council, and we will reap the financial benefit, although I have to say the joint ventures don't work on commercial rates of return, so it's not a sort of like a multi-million-pound bonanza in any shape or form. What it is a return that is reasonable, but the real return is the improvement to people's lives, the jobs, and the brownfield development that has taken place. So the suggestion within the report is that there is a delay in taking the capital receipt in order that that money is the council's contribution towards the investment costs to get the building work underway. Otherwise, we would have to lend money into the joint venture, shareholder funds, and that would entail a greater cost to the council in terms of financing the money that we need to put in as a partner in that joint venture. And I'm sure Mr. Gibson could give you a lot more sort of finer detail of that, but the broad brush approach and the layman's approach, the council's approach, is it's the easiest, simplest and most economically, financially viable way of doing it than not. It will not result in any delay in terms of construction or Section 106 monies that are required for doing highway work or anything else. So I would be happy, Chairman, to move the recommendations of the report, and I hope that they're overwhelmingly accepted by the Secretary.
Thank you, Councillor Wick. Do you want a seconder?
Can I ask a question, Chair? I spoke to Philip, obviously, a few days ago on the Coal Authority report and the letter they've written to us. Obviously, they've identified one, as David has said already. Will you tell the obviously public when is the second? Obviously, there's a further research going to go taking place to identify the second coal mine, and what are timescales? What's happening, because none of us know. So could you just obviously elaborate on that, please?
Yes, so through yourself, Chair, is that okay? Yeah, very, very briefly. You said, Councillor Hanif, the location of one mine shaft has been found. We believe there may be a second mine shaft, and we can't be definitive about it, but we believe there may be a second mine shaft. So a borehole survey is to be procured imminently, and I would hope within a matter of a very few weeks we actually understand whether that shaft is there or whether we don't find it. So it won't impact on the development programme, but it will over the course of the next few weeks.
Thank you.
So it could, if there is a shaft there, and then as obviously David mentioned before, then the 129 houses we're looking at will be further reduced. Is that the possibility there?
That is always a possibility, but obviously depending on the location. But clearly, we would aspire and hope we can actually get the 129 houses on the site. It really depends if we find a shaft and the location of that
Yeah.
shaft.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So you second that?
Yeah, I'll second
Thank you. Councillor in the email.
Yeah, I'll just touch upon the point which has been just been discussed now in terms of the Court Authority report. And the question I want to ask is, yes, we understand we're waiting to see exactly where this mine shaft will be, but in terms of the disposal area, that will then change. Is there somehow we can, because we're saying the area will be, the boundary will be changed, and then there's going to be implications for the council going forward in terms of maintenance and looking after that piece of land. Could we possibly look at that land being transferred as well? Then there's no liability on the council going forward. That's just a question. In terms of comments about the joint venture in Pearl, I echo what's been said in terms of the huge and really successful schemes across Pendle which we've had over the years, and many of them projects would not have been delivered without the work which we've done through the joint venture. And just a question finally in terms of the delayed capital receipts, would like to hear from Richard in terms of the potential risks for the council, because I'm just thinking ahead, if going forward there isn't the money there in the pot at the end of it when the whole scheme is done, where does that leave the council in terms of the £500,000? So are there any risks involved in terms of delayed funds being released to the council?
Thank you. Let's bring Councillor Azarali in and then bring the officers in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify
Just give a brief, yeah.
some of the sort of points that David's made. Not knocking Pearl. Pearl's done fantastic work across a number of different partnerships that's established. And in fact, actually, I secured millions of pounds through the County Council and the LEP, along actually presenting with Tony Greaves to get money in for the North Light scheme. So I'm not knocking it, so I just want to clarify that very openly because it's been recorded, because he keeps throwing that accusation all the time. Second point I want to make is knocking Pearl, or residents are the ones who live in that area around that site. If contractors employed by the Pearl Venture Group work outside their operating hours or at weekends or on bank holidays, we have every right as councillors to raise that at this meeting, because it's the residents who suffer, not some of the people around the table, because they don't live in that area. So it's important, and that's something that needs to be looked in. And thirdly, the Section 106 monies, I'd just like to ask the Mr. Spare, so when is that 106 monies going to be released to the Highways Authority, so those improvements to Barkerhouse Road can be made, so that resident safety and children's safety is of paramount importance, can be done. And thirdly, no one's mentioned around the executive the lessons to be learned from this planning application. Residents talked about environmental concerns, talked about coal mine shafts, and they were poo-pooed. No, you're absolutely wrong. Our officers' reports are right. And sometimes things can go wrong. But it's important you learn the lessons from this, because in 6 months, a year's time, another scheme could come up somewhere in Colne or Barnoldswick or Earby or Barrowford, and at that point the same things could happen. And no one's answered that. So I'd like that answers from yourself, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Storm?
Thank you, Chair. I note Councillor Whip's somewhat uncritical view of Pearl, and I echo Councillor Alley's comments in relation to the need for Pearl to be accountable and open to criticism and challenge. My question related specifically to section 12, paragraph 12 of the paper, which is relating to the capital receipt. And again, it says, Pearl have intimated that they will seek further shareholder investment to the company to cash flow the scheme. It's a similar question to Councillor Ahmed's in that I would like to understand from Mr. Gibson what that means, and whether effectively it means that we are basically subsidising a cash flow which is an inappropriate, seems to me, use or diversion of money that ought to be received as a capital receipt for the land sale.
Thank you.
Yeah, through yourself, Chair. In terms of Councillor Ali's question with regard to Section 106 release, the answer is I do not know this evening, but I will find that out and I'll write to you as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Richard?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So, there's a paper actually coming to the next exec in July around Pearl investments. So, yes, there's a wider debate that you could have about whether or not the council wishes, as a shareholder, to invest in the scheme, or whether you want the joint venture to find its own financing. So it's perfectly possible for the council to say, no, I want the receipt now, and no, as shareholder, I won't put any more money in. And that would be the least risky thing that the council could do to secure the full value of the receipt and not expose itself any further to any risk. So that's perfectly possible should the council wish to do it. So what the suggestion is, and I'm waiting for Pearl Together as a company to write to Pendle Borough Council to confirm, what they're suggesting is that they will seek further shareholder loan to invest in both the Spring Mill site and further Clough Head to part finance the other half. Half of it will come from bank finance, half of it they want from shareholder loans. So rather than creating a revolving door, as Councillor Wick very well explained, it's as easy to delay the receipt. In risk terms, the capital receipt will have a long stop date and it should allow us to place a charge on the land, and that is probably more secure than waiting on shareholder loans which have an indefinite repayment. So with a shareholder loan, you're entirely at the risk of the company. With a capital receipt with a charge on the property, you've at least got the comfort of a charge. But I think in risk terms, yes, the council is exposing itself to risk through its joint venture company. So we do have a substantial shareholding in all the Pearl companies.
Can I come back?
Thank you.
Chair, briefly, can I come back? Because
Very briefly, yeah.
but what you said is important because the council is exposing itself to risk. None of these implications are spelled out at all in the executive paper. So I would ask that the executive reconsiders and elaborates on its attitude towards risk and spells the attitude out so that councillors and residents can see clearly what's going on here.
Councillor.
Yes, Chairman. I think I need to backtrack, you know, sort of like a couple of decades now. The purpose of setting up the joint ventures in the first place was in order to continue with regeneration work in Pendle when traditional regional housing grants dried up, and the way in which Pendle Council levered money into doing that work was we would put an asset into the joint venture. And there's now multiple joint ventures. You know, there's Pearl 1, Pearl 2, Pearl, Briarfield Mill, and Pearl Together. And the first three of those are joint ventures with a single entity, and the fourth one, Pearl Together, is a joint venture with 3 entities. So in the first 3, Pendle Council put 30% investment in, and sorry, I've got my percentages wrong, but Pendle Council put a percentage in, and there was a multiplying factor. The private sector investor put a much greater amount in. So for every pound that we were putting in, there was several pounds coming in from the private sector. And the risks that we took, the biggest risk that we took as a council, was taking on Briarfield Mill. who on earth, in their right mind, would take on a multi-storey monolith the size of Briarfield Mill, you know, pay £1 million for it, and then over the succeeding years work on making it a viable place that people live and work and turn it into the thriving thing that it is. So yeah, we took a huge risk, a massive risk, and let's face it, it's a tremendous success. So yes, we can avoid all risk, and we didn't have to do the joint venture. Nobody was forcing us to, but as a group of councillors, and as a group of councillors in unanimity between Conservative and Labour and Liberal, we had the vision to set up something that has been absolutely crucial in driving regeneration in Pendle for the last decade and a half. And I'm pleased that we did it, and I'm glad that we took the risk. And I don't believe that the risk that we're carrying in terms of delaying a capital receipt for the period of time that gets the cash flow going in terms of the further Clough Head development is one that we should turn our backs on. We have a commitment as a partner in those joint ventures to make an investment, and we should continue to do so. I look forward to the report that we're going to get in the next meeting, and perhaps repeating some of what I said at this meeting, but maybe folk will tell me to shut up.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I think, generally speaking, the principle of housing has already been established on this site, and some of the concerns that have been raised by Councillor Ali, they'll be picked up by the planning application with certain conditions, you know, when the works will be carried out and when they are not allowed to work. So I'll move that to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, that's carried. So item 4, it's Nelson Town deal, reprofile the business resilience and growth project. So basically, this is report is asking to agree reprofiling of the Nelson Town deal business resilience and growth project. It's basically doing it in 3 years rather than 4 years, and to review the buffer zones on an annual basis. So I'll move the report.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I second the report, I just want to say how positive it is to see businesses taking up the grant. We had quite a healthy debate around the point in terms of the intervention rate, in terms of the buffer zone. I think it was about 9 months ago or something like that. There was impassioned remarks both by myself, Councillor Nadeem Ahmed and others in terms of how that buffer zone should obviously stick to Nelson. I know this report suggests that for now that buffer zone is not going to be looked at, and that should be looked at the end of each year. And hopefully, with the way that the uptake is going with businesses here in Nelson, hopefully that will continue for the life of the intervention period. I'm more than happy to second the report. As I say, the report's very positive in terms of the current uptake, and I'd urge officers to continue doing what they're doing in the background in terms of the marketing and the promotional aspect of getting the message out to those businesses who could probably still take advantage of that grant, and of course the benefits can be seen as well. So I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you. Those in favour? Thank you. Next item is Cornmarket Hall Square. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. As you recall, at the last executive, we deferred a decision on submitting a planning application for the Cornmarket Hall redevelopment in order to convene a meeting of a working group that we set up, which met on Monday of this week. And I'm very pleased to report, Mr Chairman, that thanks to Councillor Hanif from the Executive, Councillor Lord, who attended from Town Council, and together with the Chairman of Town Council, colleagues from Common District Committee, and most importantly 2 representatives of the market traders, we had a very constructive meeting supported by the Raise Partnership and not to miss Mr Spur from the list, and in a lot of ways we had a factory reset. This is a scheme that has been discussed in one shape or form for the last 2 years, but regrettably the market traders haven't been as well informed as they might otherwise have been, and I think there was a positive vibe in the room when we met on Monday, in the traders felt that they were being listened to, and that is a shift from what they'd previously experienced. So without going through a blow-by-blow account of what was said and the issues that we raised at the meeting, if I can refer to the recommendations from that working group to this executive, there is a paper that's being passed around. I'll just refer to the what was agreed, and this is that the executive be recommended to, firstly, approve the submission of a revised planning application for the remodelling and refurbishment of Colne Market Hall, with the addition of new residential units to the first floor, use of a glazed wall between the Market Hall / front area and amended layout. 2, request an assessment of the viability of the plans for the front of the build in the vicinity of the proposed food hall. I'll come back to that in a minute. 3, ask Raise Partnership to look at the resources available in temporary accommodation and consult with the market traders to identify a suitable date for relocation, avoiding Christmas trading period, map their needs and map their requirements with what was available, and that an outline project programme, including a timeline for trader relocation, be completed by 19th of July. In other words, we try and give some certainty as to what the programme will be, when people will have to move out, when they can move back in. 4thly, ask that an assessment be undertaken of the tenure / management options for the first floor residential units. And then finally, ask that a proposal for Pendle Borough Council funding to support trader relocation be prepared and presented to the executive for consideration. That's the end of the recommendations, Chairman, from the working group. I've just got one final thing to add on to that as a decision resolution of this executive, and that is that the working group be asked to continue and keep a watching brief on the further design and subsequent development and implementation of the Market Hall redevelopment. There's probably too many redevelopments or developments in there, but I'm sure Joanne will sort that one out. So in total, Chairman, we've now got a scheme that instead of kicking people out of the Market Hall, what we hope to do is turn the Market Hall element around within a 12-month period. I don't mean 12 months from now, I mean 12 months from when we start work, with a phased way of doing the residential units, so that the market hall can be redeveloped. We're looking at the viability of the food hall as initially presented, and the word that we've used extensively is flexible space, so that we actually ensure that we're not undermining the vitality of the rest of Colne with its multitude of cafes and restaurants and takeaways by putting yet another outlet into the mix. That we sort out all the temporary accommodation that we can, and a benefit of having Colne Town Council round the room, around the meeting on Monday, was they immediately offered a shop unit that they have next to the town hall for use by a market trader as part of that. And as for the first floor residential units, there'd been an insistence under the previous proposals that they were only for sale, and we do have an inquiry from Peter Birchville Trust to partner with us in terms of that. We're not saying Peter Birchville Trust, but look at what is available, and perhaps that social housing element would be a much more appropriate use of those first floor flats than trying to sell them off, which just to come back to the previous discussion, has quite a considerable element of risk. So I would like to introduce a bit more certainty into what funding is available, rather than leave it to the chances of a market which is going to be crucified by interest rates going up, as they have by another 0.5% today, and however much will come in the future. So, you know, let's not be left at the mercy of the market. Let's get some certainty into it, and let's get ahead with this. I think the last thing to say, Chairman, is that I went around the market hall this morning, spoke to as many traders, listened to what they were saying to me today. I think there is a desire for speed, to get on with this as quickly as we can, having ironed out quite a few of the wrinkles, and that we can't, you know, sort of suffer death by a thousand cuts by letting this drag on and drag on and drag on. We now need to get on with it as soon as we ever can. So can I move those recommendations, please, Chair?
Thank you, Councillor Wick.
I'll
Councillor
second
Hall.
that, and I'll speak. Yeah, everything that Councillor Whip has said is obviously correct. There was definitely, I went into the market on Wednesday and spoke to most of the traders, and the positivity there that wasn't there before is now coming through, and everybody's feeling much happier. I'm not saying they're not apprehensive, and they will be. And the other thing that they are happier is that they can see now that they've got a good team there, that are going to work the socks off to get this done as quickly as possible. Quicker the better. So yeah, it's all very positive stuff. I'm sure people at the meeting, I'm sure everybody at the meeting hopefully went away feeling the same. And I've seconded.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Sutcliffe.
Thank you, Chairman. It's interesting that Councillor Whip talked about speed and delays towards the end of his comments. I think you'll note my comments from the last meeting of the executive, where I talked about the need and the desire to move this planning application on. It's something that we've wanted for a very long time, as it went through different iterations and conversations with the market traders and different consultations and the developer. The developer wasn't present at the meeting, proposed developer, of the working group on Monday. I think their input could have been quite valuable actually, as well as that of the architect, both of whom regularly attended the market forum that's liaised between traders and councillors, the council, councillors and obviously the different interested parties within that group. The idea of the market seems to focus very much on the market traders, and the concept of this development focuses very much on the traders, and that's right. But it's not the be-all and end-all of this scheme, and shouldn't be the be-all and end-all of this scheme either. The Levelling Up Fund bid was made to support the Heritage Quarter and the nighttime economy of Colne Town Centre. So it was a roughly £6.5 million bid that supported 3 theatres and the Market Hall redevelopment. The theatres are completely separate, and works are pretty much well underway to deliver what they need to secure their futures, which is a wonderful thing for the economy of Colne. In addition to that, and to support their economy and that of the nighttime of Colne Town Centre, the idea of this food court, and I wish that the food courts label had never been put on this part of the building, because it's simply a reorganisation and a remapping of the existing stalls that were already within the market. The idea of bringing them together cuts costs in terms of the delivery and the structure of the building, and running costs, and it also means that that part of the building can stay open later into the evening if those traders should so wish, to support that nighttime economy, pre-theatre dinner, that kind of thing, street food before you need to go to the theatre. That was the idea and the concept of having a street side food court element. Traders have had obvious concerns over the years, literally over the years, over the last 2 years throughout this, and those have been taken on board all the way along. We've had regular conversations with those, with all of the traders, and there have been surveys done. So the conversations that happened on Monday were generally nothing new. There were things that all members that were there pretty much knew, all officers knew about, including Richard Savoury and Daisy from Ray's Partnership. I think the only people being brought up to speed, or probably person being brought up to speed, Councillor Hanif probably wouldn't have been familiar with the detail of the project and the conversations, but the only person would be Sarah Lee, who is a new member of Ray's Partnership. So she was scribbling down notes about all of that. Now, I talked about the scheme being bigger and wider for Colne. We have an ambition in Colne, and we want it to be the best place in the area. And we make no apologies for that. We want it to be the place that people come to have a good time, to spend their money, to drive our economy, to live, work and enjoy themselves. That's what we want to deliver. Colne Market has the potential to do that, and not just the market site. All the way through our conversations, we've looked at a wider development of that site. That included things like more apartments, more living space, a reorganisation of that entire site, including the delivery of a cinema. Now, we take on board that the finances of this project have been a very difficult thing to manage, and we've scaled the project back. But what we want to do, and what I'm asking you as the exec to do, is to make this an ambitious phased development, so that this should be titled as Phase 1. The redevelopment of Colne Market should be Phase 1 of this site. It can go on then to deliver further things should the funding become available. What I don't want to do is that it ends there. What's the point of having a dream and stopping? I don't believe in that. We want better for the people of Pendle and the people of Colne, and I think that's exactly what we should do. So please don't take those plans off the table. I understand that they can't happen now, but please keep them, as the developer and the architect did, within the scope of that development, so that they can be readdressed in the future if funding becomes available. Just one further comment, and it's literally just one comment about the housing tenure on the first floor. I'm perfectly open to a review of what that looks like, and I've spoken to Philip Spur about this, about whether it's private sale or a lease on block or whatever that looks like, but that should be properly assessed. My opinion is it should be private sale, because we want to capitalise on dinkies, dual income, no-keep families, where people have lots of income ready to spend within your town centres, and that's where your money and your ambition and your great town centres come from. Please don't overlook it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more speakers?
Can I just respond if there's no further contributions?
No, Councillor David.
If I can just respond.
Councillor Nadeem Howard.
Yeah, just want to echo what Ash has just been talking about. I think the key to this scheme is is the ambition. And I understand in terms of the concerns which the traders raised at the previous meeting and have been raising for some time, which the officers reassured the executive that them concerns would be looked at and make sure that the communication is better going forward. But in terms of the scheme as it was initially discussed and the scheme as it sounds like, the way it's going, what we're looking at, I think seems like there's doubts over the food court and definitely over the cinema. And I think them two elements of the scheme are really crucial, because I think what they do is they attract people into the town centre, increase footfall, which then benefits the whole of the Combe centre and the businesses. I think that's the crucial part. Yes, the traders are an important part of it, but that isn't the whole scheme. And I think it's got to bring benefits to the wider community in Combe as well. And I think I'd like to request the executive look at the comments which Ash has raised in terms of the future of the scheme and the different phases and the potential the scheme could have. I know it's challenging, there are obviously limits to how much money we have, but I think that they need, before the cinema and the food court are no longer part, is suggests to me that may no longer be part of the scheme. I think that is concerning. I think it shouldn't be ruled out at all at this stage.
Thank you. Councillor David.
Yeah, just responding to the debate. I don't think a food court or that concept is being ruled out. What we're saying is we're going to review, we're going to have a good hard common sense evaluation of, is it real world or is it some sort of dream or aspiration. And Councillor Ahmed also said there are doubts about whether the scheme includes a cinema. Well, there is no doubt about whether the scheme includes a cinema. It does not. And I think this is the problem that has beset the last 2 years, that there have been aspirations that have been unreal, completely outside any prospect of delivery on the ground. And the first set of plans had a cinema included, and completely unrealistic, unaffordable. Why on earth, if you've got, say, 4.5 million to play with, do you come up with a scheme that's going to cost you £8 million, £9 million, £10 million, £12 million? It's bonkers. And I think that the councillors who've been running this up to press, and Ash is one of them, have to get real. We are talking about the art of the possible here. And going back to the joint venture discussion earlier on, we took a punt on Briarfield Mill and acquiring it for £1 million. And that was a vision that, yeah, we can do something with it. But it's taken us millions and millions and millions of pounds and a lot of years to get to the point where we can see the completion of the work and the transformation of that thing. Now, at the moment, we've got a position, and I wish we weren't starting from here, that there's a certain amount of money on the table and we've got to get on with it. March 2025 is the deadline for actually having done all this work, and 2 years have been wasted by these unrealistic expectations. Now, Councillor Sutcliffe said the market traders shouldn't be the be-all and end-all. I disagree with the thinking behind that statement, because for the market traders, those businesses are their livelihoods. They are their be-all and end-all. And from the very get-go, the market traders should have been part and parcel of proper discussions about what was going to happen to their livelihoods. The town council ought to have been part and parcel of those discussions as a town council around the table. And as we've seen from their participation on Monday, the fact that they were sat at the table, unlocked doors and provided further options for temporary allocation. I think Councillor Sutcliffe's contribution this evening underlines the fundamental failure over the last 2 years is that Councillor Sutcliffe and other Conservative councillors have repeatedly told the traders what's going to happen. The factory reset that we've had this last few weeks is that we are listening to what the traders are telling us and acting on what they are saying. And the change, the sea change in their attitude and enthusiasm for that project was entirely evident when I listened to what they had to say this morning. So, you know, the cinema disappeared under the Conservatives because it was utterly unaffordable. Councillor Ahmed said, we shouldn't, have doubts about the cinema. It ain't there. It wasn't there under the Conservative plans. And I very much doubt whether there'll be any feasible cinema proposal comes up in the near future, or even the medium term for Colne. You're not going to get a multiplex. They're doing one in Burnley. No cinema operator, given the fact that cinemas lose money hand over fist, is going to put one in the middle of Colne. And good luck if we can attract an Everyman, but that's not my judgment. So I think we've got to be realistic. I wouldn't have started from here. I would have done something very much differently. I would have done it very differently. I would have carried the market traders with us rather than antagonising them. And I think we would have had work underway, if not completed, in some significant form by now. So I've moved the proposals and I hope that we have support across the executive really.
Thank you. All those in favour? That's carried. Next item is the ICT strategy.
Could I just move it, Chairman?
Yeah, I was going to say I'll second it. Because it's very clear the report. There needs to be an upgrade of the infrastructure, and the wider ICT strategy is noted. It's quite a detailed report. So yeah, all those in favour? Corporate peer challenge. Councillor Whip.
Well, Chairman, I was just saying to Councillor Tom Whip, are you taking this one? Essentially, the decision in front of us, Chairman, is the live streaming of meetings, and although it is being live streamed tonight, hopefully it's still working. The decision before us is how we get the council corporately to undertake that streaming rather than it be at the whim of a couple of councillors who spend time, effort and money doing it off their own bat, and it not being as reliable as what we would wish, because it's a bit of a Heath Robinson setup. So, Chairman, the report spells out different ways of doing it. I think in terms of the realities, if we want to get something underway in short order, we need to get people to quote, to come along, point a camera and have a shotgun microphone so that we can do a decent job can be done of it. My estimation is that that will cost us a few £100 per meeting, not a great deal of money in the scheme of things, and that's what was happening prior to the Conservatives discontinuing the videoing of council meetings and putting them up on the internet. So that's the first proposal, Chairman, is that in the short term we get somebody to come in, film the meetings, stream it with a dongle like what we're doing, or maybe they'd be allowed to plug into the council's intranet, you never know, which would be more reliable. Secondly, that we draw options for cameras that can be either fixed or a mobile system that could move from, say, the council chamber into this room, but that would be operated in-house, having a programmed system so that you just have presets and, you know, the camera pans round to wherever speaking. And I would like to couple with that, Chairman, an issue that was highlighted at the last council meeting, where the current mayor, like yourself, is very softly spoken, and the current audio system that we've got isn't suited to actually ensuring that people can hear what's going on. So I'd like to include with the streaming option the prospect of boosting our audio system so that there is a better microphone for the mayor at the very least, and perhaps have a system where each councillor has a mic in front of them, or you share one between two, you press a button and that's how it works. There's plenty of options out there. In the short term, let's get on with it, just hire somebody in, won't cost a fortune, and then we look at the options which range from cheap and cheerful through to more sophisticated systems that in the report Mr Gibson's included one that would cost £100,000. We won't be doing that one, but you know, it might be cheaper in the end to spend a little bit of money on capital that enables us to run it less expensively than others. But we need to do it. Pendle Council was doing this in 2019. It was discontinued when the Conservatives took charge. It's a vital part in nowadays in open, transparent and open and transparent democracy. I think that's the way to go.
Thank you. Do I second it?
I'll second that.
All those in favour?
Chair? I'd just like to come in, please, if that's okay.
Just briefly go.
Yeah, I'm surprised that we've got the final action plan report and the corporate fee challenge, and there's been just a couple of minutes discussion on it on one particular issue. I think there's a bit more to the corporate fee challenge than what's been mentioned. So I think just to dismiss this report so lightly, I think is really surprising. In terms of the live streaming of meetings, again, decisions are being taken. Fine, it's your right to introduce live recording of meetings, but it's not clear to me, sat here, what the cost implications are at all. I know Council Whip is saying, oh well, it's only small amount, but what we're talking 500, we're talking 1,000. So how councillors can make a decision without knowing the exact cost implications, and also the staffing implications of the decision which you're rushing into. So I think they need to be considered and debated in a bit more detail before a decision is made. And I take it from what's been proposed that a further report will come back to the executive in terms of the long-term solution going forward. And if I've understood correctly.
Thank you.
And my final point is in terms of on page 2, some of the proposals from the corporate peer challenge, just like to ask regarding the election cycle, is that going to be considered by the administration?
I think there's none of
Moving
these.
to 4 yearly cycle.
I mean, none of these have been dismissed. I think the current shared administration is given a different direction to what was being proposed previously.
No, but it's not being
Councillor
discussed. You're mentioning it, but you're not mentioning, for example, the election cycle. Is that something which the
No,
coalition's
at the
going to
moment,
look
no.
at, or are you just dismissing that?
Mr Chairman, Councillor Ahmed just used the word coalition. I don't know where this coalition is. Where can anybody see a coalition? There is a shared administration, and I think Councillor Ahmed needs to get his semantics correct.
Councillor Stone.
Thank you, Chair. I'd echo Councillor Ahmed's comments. I also wanted to raise a question in relation to the rather curious call-in procedure that we have. In a council represented by 3 parties, we appear to have a constitutional requirement that for a call-in it requires at least 3 members from at least 2 parties. Now, I'm sure, Mr Chair, that you would agree with me that that we all want to work together, but here is a measure which appears directly to discriminate against the opposition party. So, Mr Chair, would you care to look at that one again?
Councillor Conway.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's very clear that we're noting this in moving what Councillor Witt did. That's all the recommendations call on to note the report. As to elections, we've been pretty clear previously on the election cycle that we prefer. We're sticking to what we've got. In terms of the cost for streaming, Councillor Whip again was quite clear. A couple £100 per meeting at most. And obviously that will be market tested and tendered out. Chair, I think that in terms of calling procedure, that is a matter for council, not the executive. That was decided at a council meeting previously. It's not for us to discuss here, Chair.
Discuss it.
No. Yeah, I think I've got that in there, Chair.
Thank you.
It's mentioned in your paper.
Move on to
Okay. All those in favour of the recommendation moved by Councillor David Wick? That's carried. Next item is the residential and mobile homes.
Can I chair move the recommendations? I think we discussed that.
I'll second that, Chair.
Yeah, in the last meeting then, and just one question. How many sites do we have for mobile homes? Is it 1 or 2 in Pendle? Do we know?
Could be 7.
There's 3 sites currently that would fall into this.
3.
3.
Where are they?
We've got Dalesview Caravan Park at Salsforth, we've got Prospect Farm on Lenches Road, and we've got Pendle Valley Caravan Park at Blackwell Bar Road.
That's fine.
Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Next item is the cemetery sites, provision for burial sites and cemetery proposal. Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Chairman. I think this is a really important report, and I just want to thank the officer, David Walker, for his work and for the summary that he presented. I think it's really important for us as a council to forward plan, in providing the provision of burial. As you'll be no doubt aware, there's lots of progress being made on the new cemetery site over in Nelson, in my ward of Brighfield, East and Clover Hill. I have had a couple of meetings with David about the progress with that site, but clearly this is about other sites throughout the whole of the borough. I'm more than happy to move the recommendations. However, it will be subject to a couple of amendments, which I know Councillor Whips will probably want to come in and make some remarks in terms of Barnoldswick and Aby. But before we get to that, I was wondering if David has some comments. If he wants to come in, I'm more than happy to let him in and discuss the report, or maybe you can fit it either way.
David, do you want to add anything to the report?
Thank you for the opportunity to talk. Yeah, I think the report just basically lays out the situation as it lies across the borough for us. relation to burial space and probably it's reducing amounts. It's also highlighted the difficulties that we have in finding space that can be used for burials, and we put forward some recommendations regarding the pre-purchasing of burial plots, which would help us extend the life of the current cemeteries. And then also a proposal for us to investigate the development and or consideration of crematorium facilities, which will probably sustain the service for many years to come, introduced. So I think there's quite a number of things for the EU members to take a view upon this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I think for me, a couple of reservations I do have. I know there's a lot of work going on at the moment in regards to the new cemetery. I just want to pick up on the final point that David made in terms of the crematorium. Just looking at the financial implications, it suggests that we're going to be looking at around about £30,000 costs in terms of the investigation just around the feasibility and all the other planning, management and design aspects. No doubt such a facility is going to be costing this council a significant amount. My guess is probably £5 or £6 million. More than happy to be £6 to £8 million. Thank you, Chair. I don't know where we're going to get that from, and given the current challenges that the council faces, and of course the other progress that the council is making in trying to reach a solution for this future planning of burial sites, my view is that the recommendation at point number 6 for now should be parked for now. I am happy with the other recommendations, other than maybe 2 and 3, which I need some assistance on from Councillor David or Tom Wick, in terms of their views in those particular recommendations. But bar number 6, I'm happy to move the rest.
Councillor Tom Wick.
Thank you, Chair. Just on removing the item on crematorium facilities, I mean, there is a significant lack of crematorium facilities in the borough. I know all the relatives that I've been to the funeral for, that's a bit morbid, is this? We've all had to go to Skipton, which is the closest one. I think that people should have the decency to be able to, you know, get the relatives cremated in the borough where they lived, as much as being buried in the area where they lived. I think both options are as important to those families. So I would urge councillors to keep item 6 in. I think it should be explored. I think there should be at least one site in the borough for that to happen. And if we can do it on one of the sites we already have, that would be great. I'm unsure how we could, you know, action that in the future, but we should at least have the wherewithal to know we could do it. As for item 2, I think the Gill site seems perfectly reasonable. Yeah.
Councillor Nadeem Ahmed.
Yeah. In terms of the crematorium service, which is the point Tom's just raised, Councillor Ali, you mentioned a figure 5, 6. Was it 5, 6?
7 to 8.
What was that for? Sorry,
7 to £8 million for the overall setting up and rolling out of a crematorium.
Is that the cost, right? Okay.
That's what I'm directed at.
Oh wow, that's huge. Yeah. I mean, it's a difficult one, giving them costs as to where we go from there. But I think, in terms of going forward, in terms of obviously you would generate money as well at the same time. I don't know. I think it possibly needs to be explored a bit more going forward. I'm not saying let's go ahead and start spending this 30,000, but I think a bit more discussion around the possibility rather than just ruling it out altogether. I think that needs to be considered. And can I just make a request in terms of the recommendations and as part of the investigation process, could I please request that area committee be consulted?
Thank you.
Chairman, I'm happy to let Councillor David in before I come in.
Councillor David.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to refer to the position in EAB, which is the third recommendation, and the position in Avey that there was extension land owned by Pendle Council, which was transferred to Avey Town Council some time ago, and there is a thriving allotment site on that land. Now, if you remember, the last time there was a suggestion of building on creating a cemetery on allotment land. This room was packed with people, and it's ended as up with a £1.5 million bill for and counting for a new cemetery site in Nelson. So I'm really reluctant to suggest that we look at using allotments in Avey to extend the cemetery. I think there are possibilities of acquiring land adjacent to the cemetery, and I'm sorry if I'm getting my geography wrong, but there's land there's a land adjacent to the allotment site which it might be possible to use, and there's also land adjacent to the cemetery. So the cemetery gets very narrow and it goes up the hill, and there's land flanking the cemetery which may be possible to utilise for cemeteries. So I would ask that we vary recommendation 3 to ask Avey Town Council what they think, and whether or not they would be willing to look at releasing some or part of the allotment land for cemetery use, but that we also explore the opportunity of alternative adjacent land that could be used. I think, just making a general comment really, I think it's important that it was said under the previous administration when committing the council to like £1.5 million of expenditure, the justification was, well, this will be a cemetery for the whole of Pendle, and yes, it'll last for decades and decades and decades. The reality is that people want burial plots which are close to the families, and they're not going to travel from one end of Pendle to the other. So I think it is incumbent on us to identify ways in which we can expand cemeteries where necessary. On the final point, the crematorium facilities, I think I agree with Councillor Tomwick. I would support his proposal that remains in the resolution. It won't cost a fortune to have a look at it. If it's a non-starter, it's a non-starter, but it is the way that plenty of families, plenty of people choose to have their remains disposed of, and we should try and see whether we can do it in Pendle or not. I end up either travel to Skipton or Burnley in terms of cremations, and if we could do it closer to home, I think that would suit a lot of bereaved families.
Do you have a second here?
Yes, I do.
We have to incorporate. Yeah. So
we're dealing with point 3 with the amendment. I'm happy to incorporate that in there.
You have to incorporate everything except for number 6.
Number 6, yeah. Can I just come back in on number 6, Chair? I know Councillor Wick has made the point about bereaved families and their wishes. No issue with that whatsoever. Every bereaved family has every right to consider the options for burial or cremation. I think the point I'm looking at is looking at the overall project and the overall work that it's going to entail in dealing with points 1 to 5, of course dealing with the other new cemetery site and all the other positive developments that are coming from this particular department. I just think with point number 6, given the financial implications, and of course there's an income generation, no doubt will be benefits linked with that. I'm not saying it's not something that we could consider in the future. I'm just simply suggesting that for now it's sort of, parked and considered maybe after some of the other developments are crystallised and we learn a bit more about some of the other developments. That's my reasoning behind it. So I do respect the views that Councillor Whip has put forward.
So, Councillor Whip.
Sorry, Chairman, but I do disagree with that sentiment. I think it's hard to talk about it from a financial point of view when you've already put in 1.5 million for a cemetery plot, and this is a relatively small sum to look at the provision of cremation. There's a large portion of the population in Pendle who do get cremated, and I think that it's very unfair on those families that other people are being catered for by a public body like Pendle Council, and the families who do get cremated aren't being accounted for and have to go outside the borough in their bereavement period. So I will move an amendment to include item 6 in this proposal, Chair.
So we have an amendment.
And second.
Second it. Yeah. So we have an amendment to include item 6. All those in favour of the amendment? All those against? So that's carried. So now that comes the substantive motion. So with amendments that were proposed.
Yes.
Yeah. With the,
Yeah.
all those in favour of that?
Yeah.
That's carried. Item 10 is phase 3 of the Avery flood remediation scheme.
If I can, Chairman, without going through the report blow by blow, clearly the last major flooding incident in Avery was in 2015, when there was extensive flooding from a variety of sources, and since 2015 a significant amount of work has been carried out on 2 of the 3 causes of flooding. One of them from the water that comes, if I describe it as from the old railway line, it's the White House Farm area, and work has been done to clear a blockage in the Victoria Clough culvert, and a bund has been built in order for between the railway line and the bund a reservoir has been created that would store water in flood conditions. On New Cut, we've got the flood wall on the Boot Street car park, which is reducing the risk of flooding from that source. I want to come back to that work because I think we've missed a bit of a trick, but as I say, I'll come back to that. The third cause of flooding, principal cause of flooding, is from Wentcliffe Beck. And Wentcliffe Beck is the water that comes down Water Street, and unfortunately, when it floods, it literally comes down Water Street, comes out of the beck, flows down the road. Mr. Walker and myself have paddled about in it on more occasions than we care to remember, and there is a remaining significant risk of flooding from that beck, which is Avery Beck, Wentcliffe Beck, and that is the latter part of the report, which is the proposed phase 3 works for the Avery Beck scheme. Following the Boxing Day floods in 2015, there was extensive work carried out, studies carried out by the Environment Agency consultants, who recommended the work that I've described that has been carried out, but also recommended creation of an upstream storage area on Avery Beck. and detailed specifically doing the work in an area called Burley Playing Fields, Earby Waterfalls, and our engineers looked at that scheme. I mean, the guesstimate from the Environment Agency was perhaps 8, 9, 10 million pounds, and there isn't funding to do that work. But our engineering team looked at the proposal and thought of an alternative location where the storage area could be created at significantly less cost. So a price tag of you know, 3.5, 4 million pounds. These are guesstimates rather than any sort of real estimates. And last July, the engineering section put in a bid for £2.5 million from the frequently flooded communities programme, and as a consequence of that, we have been awarded an initial £200,000, which is to draw up a scheme essentially, and this committee is asked to take the first steps in terms of getting a scheme underway. Obviously, to carry out that major scheme, that upstream storage on the Earby Beck, will take more resources. Potentially, we've got £2.5 million from the frequently flooded communities programme. We've got some change from the monies that we did for the new cut wall, Boot Street car park area, because the Environment Agency, when they're doing the scheme, their costs are rather more than we can actually achieve on the ground in the environment that Pendle Council has always operated under. So, you know, we get much better value for money, cut out a lot of the preliminaries, and ensure that every pound that's spent is delivering value for money. So we do have change from the phase 2 works that we can put into phase 3 that takes us into the, you know, circa £3 million mark, and we can bid for further funding from granting aid and other sources in order to get to, you know, I think 4 million is a reasonable sort of aiming point. We need to get the ball rolling, and you have heard perhaps me pleading for us to appoint a panel engineer previously, which is one of the first stages. So we need to do that. It's an expert thing. We don't have in-house capacity. I think that the scheme overall, had we got a fully staffed engineering section, there would be the capacity and the capabilities in-house to do it. So I hope we can return to that sort of regime. But in the first instance, we do need to get the panel engineer, that consultancy, to actually work up the possibilities and the options that we've got in front of us. So, Chairman, can I move the second recommendation? In the first recommendation, to note progress made with the Earby phase 1 and 2 from granting aid, and then to insert that we approve the work required to progress Earby phase 3 flood alleviation, and that is notably upstream storage on Earby Beck, with initial funding from the frequently flooded communities programme, the £200,000, and that we have a further report in due course setting out how we subsequently progress that. In terms of the phase 2 work, Chairman, which is substantially completed apart from snagging, there is a fresh snag that has been recently identified, and my ward colleague, Councillor Susan Land, was bending ears this afternoon in terms of the detail of some fencing around the works which are off Goodall Close, and her request is that instead of having the timber fencing, which has been subject to damage and vandalism, that we see if we can incorporate the hooped railings which are on the opposite side of the beck, rather than rather insecure timber fencing. And we can put hooped railings along the wall top on the good old close side of the beck, which would be safe and secure and everything like that. I think they put timber fencing there because there had been timber fencing, but it really took the scratch, getting damaged, vandalised, and then the safety implications. So we need to sort that one out. So I'm moving, Chairman, the recommendations that we've got. I'm inserting, getting on with the phase 3 work for upstream storage, appointing consultants, and drawing on the £200,000 we've currently got in order to progress that. Have a further report, and presumably then, Mr. Chairman, we'll be able to include it in the capital programme as a bona fide scheme, and be able to subsequently crack on with a £4 million project to reduce the risk of flooding in Earby still further. So that's what I'd move. Yeah.
Thank you. Is that seconded?
Second that.
Thank you. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried. So after that we've already dealt with. Number 12 is meeting with the NHS in Barnoldswick, the health project.
Thank you, Chairman. I think this needs to go to West Craven Area Committee, and apologies to Joanne if I am tasked for that, but yeah. Chairman, senior officers of this council coming for a tour of West Craven next week, and we'll be looking at the various sites that there are, and sort of expanding that potentialities for other options as well. It may be that we can put forward some suggestions to our NHS partners about how they could move forward with providing proper facilities in West Craven, and the report sets out some of the difficulties that there are currently and ways that they could be ameliorated. So without going into any great detail now, perhaps we could look forward to have reports at subsequent executive meetings together with to the area committee, and we chivvy the people in the NHS to actually do something. I understand, Chairman, that overviewing scrutiny following the resolution at Council is also going to be looking at this general area, and it may be that there can be working across the authority to ensure that information is shared as appropriate.
That's great. So just note that report.
Yeah.
Number 13, district enforcement.
Chairman, it's long been an aspiration to get rid of district enforcement from Pendle. We said that it was a bust business model. It was ripping people off left, right and centre in Pendle. It wasn't making Pendle any cleaner, and all it was aimed to do is feather the nest of the private sector contractors who were preying on people to pay wages and pay dividends to directors. I'm delighted that they are no longer with us, and I hope that we don't ever put any such company into play in Pendle ever again. So can I move that we note the report? Yeah, let's have a review, but let's learn the lessons.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've had a discussion with this about this particular aspect of the report with David Walker. I want to raise awareness on one of the options which has been suggested at paragraph. I've lost the page. Toward the back end of the report about town and parish councils supporting creation of new environmental wardens. Paragraph 16. Thank you, Councillor. I think it is really important that we do tackle this issue, albeit through outside resources, subcontracting, or, as the report suggests, internal resources, and obviously support from town or parish councils. I know Nelson Town Council, for example, we're hopeful that we will be looking to work alongside Pendle Council in trying to improve the resources and targeting those resources to this area. The issue of fly tipping, for example, it's rife. Some of the streets in the borough, it genuinely makes you feel upset that you actually live and work in the area that we call home, and then when you walk some of the streets and you see some of the garbage that's out there, it genuinely makes me feel upset, given that I've lived here all my life, so has my family. So I think for me it's really, really important that I'm more than happy to see the outcome of this review, and the review needs to happen, and we really need to be making some strong choices. Aside from this, David enlightened me that we had some funding, about £26,000 towards CCTV surveillance and some of the educational programs around fly tipping and some of the waste issues. I think again it's a really important initiative, and again town and parish councils have hopefully got the appetite to play a part in that. So I just wanted to highlight that. Hopefully that's one of the options we'll consider, and urge town and parish councils across the borough to look at doing the same. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you. All those in favour? Final item is the executive work programme.
Move that.
Second that. All those in favour? Thank you very much.
All right, okay. I will make sure Sarah tracks down and has a conversation with her. Yeah, absolutely.
So were you on the ferry all the way, or did you stop off? I didn't read that way. Yeah, no, the read's been the other one.
Big scramble. Yeah, you probably didn't sign out when you were initially here.
Good idea.
Well, would it be a lot? I do see that. I do see that.
Anyway. the party sat around the
Oh, well, if you're...
See you then. Sam Chainer.
with
Change and the decision was
In my opinion, unfair, is it?
I did work with you then.
Everybody has I will seriously.
Did you manage to speak to Tom Hall?
Thank you again, thanks for coming. He didn't give me an answer, but he did write it down in his papers. Right.
Sorry to interrupt you. I've got your present here.
It sounds good.
It's for this.
You're still on camera. You know, you give it
Next time.
Okay.
This, and then you can make your notes as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's really kind of you. I'm just looking at it's got a phone number in case of need.
See everybody.
Is it a gift I need to declare?
Anyway,
Yeah, so
you didn't say
we said right Wednesday, you know, same time, and he didn't say no. So,
well, I'll just send the invite out, I think. And then
I mean,
report back to us.
Yeah. So I mean, it was useful site visit. Not so useful prices from Jonathan. The stuff that we used in Bali.
What were you asking him then? What were you?
Estimate £265 per metre.
Right, okay. I was going to say something about the cemetery, but it was a more personal thing I didn't want to copy it.
Which
But the reason why we
so
had the funeral
probably
burial
we're going to
for
go
John
down.
was because to go to, and this was a family thing, but this is what it's all about, isn't it?
Because there's nowhere
Because we were taking it out of his county,
Yeah, and there you go.
and we were also
Okay.
taking out
Tom, are we
his
stopping the stream?
Oh yeah.
so you
I didn't mean to say that on camera.